Man, do I sound like really nasally? I feel like I sound really nasally.
Not any more than normal.
Oh, ouch.
I'm just kidding.
You don't sound any more sickly than your normal depressing voice.
Right. We both separately and not together went and saw the new Blade Runner movie as a follow-up to our wildly popular Blade Runner episode.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why we did it. We
Yeah,
weren't
we
going
had
to do
no
it before.
desire at all to
We
go
just
see
saw
it.
the demand for that last one.
Right.
So we both went and saw it yesterday. I saw it yesterday by myself, and you saw it by yourself on Friday because we couldn't get that to work out.
I did.
And we have not talked to each other yet since we have both seen it.
It's been a struggle.
Well, it hasn't for me because my time's been filled. But I mean,
when you're
actually,
watching
I guess,
kids, sometimes you're sitting there just letting them play and making sure they don't crack their head open on the wall or something, and
right.
your brain is allowed to just kind of wander.
Yeah. Well, I certainly have some questions. So I figured, I guess let's start out with
So actually, before we get into spoiler territory,
right.
I have something that I saw that I haven't actually watched yet.
Mm-hmm.
So this might totally get cut, but I want to watch it, and I want you to watch it and to see kind of what we think about it.
Okay.
Have you seen Amazon has a TV show that I guess they released a trailer for? Have you seen this?
No.
Do you know what I'm getting at? So
No.
all I saw was a little headline, and I was like, oh, I should watch this before the episode, and of course I haven't. But it is a based on the title, at least I'm looking it up right now. It's like an anthology series around Phillip K Dick novels.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
So
is this like a new thing coming out, or?
Yeah. I think it was like a trailer was just released or something like that.
And it's Amazon. Yeah, that would make sense because Amazon has Man in the High Castle. So it would make sense that they have other properties they're trying to exploit from him.
All right, so I found the link.
Okay.
I'm gonna send it to you. Here you go. And maybe we can both get it kind of loaded up and then hit play it around the same time.
I clicked it and nothing's happening.
You click the link and nothing's happening?
Yes.
All right, it's called Phillip K Dick's Electric Dreams.
Oh, okay.
So just search that on YouTube.
Yep, first thing that popped up. Right. Okay. So here's a 212. Click on that and watch it. That actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it has a budget because those are some big names on there.
Yeah, I'm gonna send that to my friend. He'll get a kick out of that. He claims that he hates Phillip K. Dick, but he likes every single thing he reads by him or something like that. So.
And likes all of the movies based on his books.
Yeah.
Man, that was like bigger budget than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Based on my understanding of Amazon's like original stuff so far.
They did a great. They put some budget into Man in the High Castle.
Oh, you know what? That's true.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. I watched the first episode of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that does look very interesting.
I like the idea of doing the anthology with that too.
Yeah. What I was saying though while we were watching it was I'm wondering though what happens when they run out of Phillip K. Dick material to adapt.
I mean, does he have like a whole lot of like shorts or something?
Yeah, well, I don't know how prolific he is, but he's a pretty beloved author.
Well, I know that. I just don't know how much.
My understanding is a lot of his stuff is short stories, and then he has like a couple big novels. Obviously, what Blade Runner is based off of is one of them, which is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is not as good of a title.
Yeah, for sure.
And then also Man in the High Castle, and then his big book... it's called like Ubik, or but yeah, like Scanner Darkly, Minority Report, like a lot of stuff like that. Those are all like based off short stories of his.
Yeah, that's what. So I'm like looking at the description right now, and it says each of the first season's 10 episodes tell a different narrative, all adapted from Dick's short fiction.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. Maybe it'll just be a one-time thing, or they'll every time they. I don't know. It certainly could be like a universe that could explore. You could do another episode in like a Minority Report story.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if it starts doing, it'd be smart of them at first to not do any of the known ones, right? Like,
Right.
don't do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep or Minority Report or something to start out. But, like, once you sort of established what this is, maybe in another season, you could, like, take on a more popular property. Kind of like
Right.
every time they start, like, a Sherlock Holmes thing, it's smart to start off with maybe a less known story, but
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
can move on, and then you can adapt Hound of the Baskervilles or some of the more
Right.
well-known stuff. And it's kind of like, oh, it's fun to see this story that we all know adapted in this sort of style that we now understand.
Yeah. I don't know if they would ever touch Blade Runner though. There's certainly things
Yeah,
you
that
can
would
do in
be
that like what I could see them do is like what I was saying, like the world lends itself to have original short stories in it. So if
right.
that's what they plan on doing, I actually wouldn't have a problem with that either because
Oh, I see what you're saying.
um
Like they're adapting his short stories worlds.
I don't know
No,
that.
I know you're not saying that's
Yeah.
what they're doing. I'm saying like I wasn't thinking that at all. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to focus on the same characters at all. It could just be like, oh, Minority Report is this story that lives in this world.
Yeah.
Let's not focus on the story he told. Let's focus on something else in that world.
Right. So like with Minority Report, you could tell the original short story that might be something similar to the movie. I'm not sure yet because the same friend that I sent that to has told me to read that story 80 times and I keep forgetting. But if like let's say that one's like the movie, like so they adapt that and then like the next season they're looking for more material. Like I could see them doing like another short story about like some guy who's wrongfully accused and he's like running from them for a different episode and
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
similar theme, like dealing with the same type of stuff with policing and all that sort and knowing
That
the
would almost
future
be
but a
more
different
fun.
story. Yeah.
Especially if you don't know ahead of time which story it is,
Right.
because like it would kind of be fun as the episode opens, kind of like Black Mirror. I guess this is like any anthology show where like
Yeah.
the first 10 minutes of the show, even if you don't care about the characters, it's interesting to try and understand where you are.
Yeah, so, like, even Blade Runner, that's what I'm saying, like, we'll get into it, but, like, even though I like the Blade Runner movies that have come out, I don't think they're the most interesting stories you could tell in those worlds, and
Sure,
so, like,
yeah.
I could certainly see just a different story about a replicant doing something that would be interesting as well,
Yeah, for sure.
like, as a short story. Like, it doesn't even have to be he's being hunted down or he's hunting someone down, like, that sort of thing. That would be
Right.
really cool too.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Let's see. Does it have like a date or something?
No clue. I would imagine if there's a trailer, it'd have to be soon because TV shows, I don't think they do that year out crap.
It says it's set to premiere on Amazon sometime in 2018.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe they
So,
did. I hate that.
well, but I wonder if they're doing this. Does Amazon do weekly episodes or do they drop it like Netflix? I don't actually
I
know.
think I think Amazon drops it.
All at once?
Yeah, I don't know that for sure
Okay.
though because when I went to watch,
So then that makes sense to do a trailer like that, right? Because it's produced and released almost more like a movie.
yeah, I might have to figure out how to get back on Amazon Prime before then because that does look interesting. And
Yeah.
I have not seen the second season of Man in the High Castle either, so they're starting to get some shows that I wouldn't mind watching. I just kind of didn't want to pay an extra thing.
Right.
But Amazon's kind of nice in that it's like a one-time thing. So
For the year.
yeah, like you isn't it like bi-yearly or yearly something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
You just pay for a year at a time.
Yeah. Well, and I can still get the student discount too, so I might do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I don't. Does the student one come with the video?
Yeah, yeah. It's just a student price. That's a little
Gotcha.
cheaper.
Yeah, it used to be that there was like a student version of it that got you the 2 day shipping, but didn't get you all the other like stuff that they do. But that was a long time ago. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I only had it for I actually never paid for it. They just started offering it, I think, like early last or this year or late last year or something like that. And so I just did like the free trial offer and it was for like 6 months. So for 6 months I got like
Nice.
the video and the free shipping and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
It's
that's
great.
that's definitely one of the better subscription deals in the world.
Yeah.
Like we would probably pay for it just for the 2 day shipping, but getting like
Yeah, absolutely.
it's not like most of their services are less good than the other ones, but like they just come with your subscription.
Right.
So like their music service isn't great, and we don't really use it now because we got Google Music. But before that, we did use it all the time. Like we had a bunch of like kid albums that we have because it it lets you download it to your phone,
Yeah.
so that we'd always have that available when we were in the like on a trip or something with our son. Yeah, so that's definitely interesting looking.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that more of these like anthologies type shows are coming out because it gives you because I like Black Mirror. I like that if I do get really busy like I am right now, I now you're obviously pressuring me to finish it, but other than that, like I'm not really like
I'm not really pressuring you to finish it. I might pressure you to finish it, or maybe not finish the old stuff, but I might pressure you to watch the new stuff whenever that comes out, just so that we could talk about it here. But
yeah. Well,
um,
like see to me like I kind of like those anthology shows just because it's like you can like there's been several times where I've like, all right, I got an hour and I should probably go to bed, but I don't want to like start a full movie, but I don't really feel like just watching
right.
a regular sitcom or something. And like that kind of fills that middle ground to
And the
me in my
episodes
mind anyway.
never end with you thinking, "Oh, I really need to watch another one." You know.
Yeah, right.
Instead, they end with you going like, "I need to sit down and think about my life and maybe take a shower because everything just feels gross and humanity feels bad and the world is
Yeah.
falling apart."
Yeah, they're a little pessimistic on Black Mirror.
Yeah, extremely. I really, really like the themes and sort of the ideas that they explore, but it's definitely a downer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to see an anthology series that's like happy.
Yeah, happy technology products. Like every episode just there's no stakes. It's just how technology helped them.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be awesome. I think we just call that a Silicon Valley like pitch video.
So, Blade Runner 2049. We both saw it separately. And I wanted to start by just, well, forewarning, we will get into spoilers for both Blade Runner films and maybe reading material. I don't think I have any reason to touch on the book for any reason, but just putting that out there just in
Yeah,
case something
I mean,
pops
I
in
think
my
it's
head.
safe to say that the "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep" will probably
Yeah.
be spoiled.
Yeah. So yeah, spoiler warning going forward from here. So we both saw it separately. I kind of wanted to start to just ask like so with in our last episode we talked about we watched the first one with an old teacher and we kind of at the time we didn't enjoy it so we decided to watch it again all these years later, over 10 years later I feel like it probably was. And I kind of liked it and you were still kind of same feeling but appreciated it more. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think that's the way to say it. Is like it wasn't a movie that I thought was like amazing or massively. I don't want to say didn't enjoy, but yeah, it was like I didn't think it was an amazing movie, but it had amazing elements to it.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say this, like, especially after re-listening to our last episode for the edit and all that, I do think part of my liking it now was sort of tainted by the fact that I've read the book in recent history, because I had all that in my mind and knew what was going on, and
Right.
I think that helped me along. But
Yeah, because the my one of my big things with the movie was the like on screen plot. Like the overall plot was actually good and interesting in terms of the grand scheme of things.
yeah,
The world and like how all this thing kind of fit together. But the actual like minutia of scenes and like why is this person here and all that, that to me felt like it wasn't well enough explained. Not that I want them to hold my hand, but like there was plenty of scenes where you're just like, I literally have no idea why this is here at all, and I don't understand people's motivations at all.
yeah,
Does that make
yeah,
sense? Yeah.
yeah, and I get that. So overall, then with this new one, which I think we were both excited to see. What was your like overall impression? Just like quick.
So, I mean, to me, this took all the things I liked about that first one and then elevated all of those and took all the things I didn't like and did those things amazingly better. Like, I don't know if it just worked for me in the situation I was in, but I came out of that thinking this might be the best movie I've seen this year.
Hmm.
Like, it completely, I don't want to say blew my mind, but like, I was just smiling for a lot of the movie, and I've been actively thinking about the movie constantly since then. And it's been killing me to not be able to like text you and talk about it.
Interesting. All right, so then I liked it as well, but I'll say this, like I just kind of had the same feelings that I had towards the first one, which isn't a criticism. It's just like I don't think I was as blown away as you were from based
Mhm.
off what you just said, but I definitely really liked it. Like as an overall product, it was really made very well. Everything was scripted well. Everything was really tight and thought out, even though I will undoubtedly have some questions here in a minute.
Yeah.
But now, part of it I will say is probably also, which I was telling you earlier, like I've been really busy this week, and I went and saw the movie, and I was just like absolutely dead tired. And so
Mhm.
I was very sleepy during the movie, and going to see a movie by yourself, it
Yeah.
isn't exactly a fast paced
Right. A very
thing.
long,
Yeah.
very intentionally slow.
Yeah, and so there was, I will even admit, there was a probably a 2 minute window when Edward James almost makes his cameo to when Joker shows up on the scene and murders that robot and talking about like like telling about like what they're gonna do. Like I closed my eyes for a second.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, I knew what was going on. Because as soon as as the scene changed from The Office, I was like, okay, all right, I need to pay attention, or this is not worth it.
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
so, but it was very interesting. So I was pretty tired, and I was just using that as an anecdote to explain this. but
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
that sort of colors your perspective a little bit.
and then something happened about the point where he goes to that garbage place, I guess, or refine, or outside where all the trash is. And about that point, like I was like wide awake, paying attention.
Oh, okay. That was only
Yeah,
like halfway through.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not
Okay.
saying I'm not saying I was sleeping up until that point. I'm just saying like I was like like
Need a little
forcing myself to
boost.
pay attention to that
Right.
point. And then once we got there, I was like, okay, I'm game. So my viewing may have been tainted by my mood at the time, but it actually was, even despite that, I felt like I really liked it. So
See,
that's my
I
takeaway.
like I going into it, I knew it was long. I didn't know the exact running time, but I had heard something about it being long, you know.
Is it like 2:45, something like that?
I have the IMDb page right here. It is 2 hours and 43 minutes. So we're getting
Yeah,
getting close to 3 hours there.
yeah, yeah. It felt like it. I definitely got
See,
that feeling.
and yeah, that's what's interesting is I mean, like I was aware that it was long, but getting close to the 2 hour mark, probably. I didn't actually look at my watch, but like there was a point where I was like, oh no, like they're not going to wrap this up here, right?
Yeah,
Like I didn't ever find myself wanting it to be over in a way that even like, one of the greatest long movies of all time, Return of the King,
yes,
even that movie felt long. And I'm like, I'm enjoying everything I'm seeing, but they're going to need to kind of get this going here. When, all those Lord of the Rings movies have that to it a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
But to me, this one, I was just like, no, don't stop. And maybe it was because in your head, you don't have other movies and other things, that are coming after it or something. I don't know.
yeah,
But I was completely engaged on almost every level where it was like, I just didn't want it to stop.
yeah. Well, let me, if you're okay with me doing it this way, I'm going to briefly explain the plot of the movie
Yeah,
as
yeah.
I understood it, and you correct me, and this is where my questions are going to come from.
Yeah, there's a
So,
lot of questions, and I have a lot of theories and answers because
okay,
I've been actively thinking about it a lot while watching my kids.
all right, good. So, so essentially, you open with Ryan Gosling, and it's pretty early in the movie. I don't remember. It might be in one of the opening scenes, but he's pretty much. It's told that he's a replicant, like he's one of the robots, but he's a specific new kind that has been created to hunt down these old like hangarounds, like from the
Right.
Harrison Ford era, that are still problematic because the new ones aren't able to disobey, so they just sort of like kind of like a law of robotics type thing.
Or they're
And
not.
so
They're supposed to at least.
yes, right. And so he shows up, kills this replicant after they get in a scuffle, and the replicant's last words are, something like, "You've never witnessed a miracle," or something like
Yeah,
that.
because he said something about, how does it feel killing your own kind, which that was sort of your tip
Right,
off that Ryan Gosling's a replicant. And then,
right.
yeah, he said something like, you can't understand because you've never
You
seen a
know,
miracle.
right, right. And so, basically, this particular kill that he has, like, kind of launches the forward the story, the main thrust of the story, because on this property, they find a box underground, and it has bones in it from someone. When it was the LAPD,
Yeah,
when they examine the bones, they find out that this is a replicant as well that had given birth, which is not something that's supposed to be able to happen.
right.
And so you also find out that the company that has made all of these newer replicants that are supposed to obey, he's also trying to figure out how the old Tyrell Corporation, which no longer exists, I think he like bought it out or something like that. Like
Yeah,
apparently they had experimented with this, and so upon finding out about this, like he's trying to figure out how to make his androids have that capability as well. But he has more nefarious reasons, from my understanding, I guess, because he wants a bigger labor force for slavery. Because he says, like, part of our problem is just like we lost our taste for like controlling other people or something.
right. All great civilizations were built on the backs of slave labor,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
his
yeah.
point.
So he wants it. So he wants the kid. Sorry. So there's a kid apparently that's been born, and that's from an android. So they're trying. So both the LAPD sends Ryan Gosling to find him, and then the company wants the kid found as well. Which I guess the company's representative robot is following Ryan Gosling, so that I guess then she can take the kid whenever he finds him, and then Ryan Gosling and LAPD are trying to find the kid so that they can squash this, because they believe that finding out something like this to the general public would like break this like wall between.
Yeah, and importantly, it's not LAPD, the whole organization. It's this one, like,
Cop.
yeah, Robin Wright's character.
Yeah, the
She kind of was
lady
like,
from Princess Bride.
oh yeah, I think of her as from
House of
House
Cards.
of Cards, right?
You're right.
But yeah, she kind of sees this as like, if this gets out, this is the type of information that could break like everybody's understanding of how the world works, and this could cause war or something.
Right. So, upon this point, before I go further in the plot, this is my first question. So, one thing I was trying to figure out as far as consistency goes is, so LAPD well, they're having Ryan Gosling track down this kid so that they can presumably like keep it under wraps. I don't know if that means
No, they were trying to
he's
get him to kill him or kill the
okay.
kid.
Right, right. So, well, right, but I'm saying for the goal of like keeping it under wraps.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's their goal. The company wants the kid so that they can exploit it.
Yep.
Um,
Like
so
basically take it apart and figure out how it works.
okay. All right. Okay, we'll move forward then. My question will be bumped up then once more details are out. So basically Ryan Gosling like starts tracking down this trying to find this kid, and there's some like clues that leads I forget what it was specifically that led him to the garbage place. Do you remember? There was a thing. I just don't remember what it. Oh, it was what was it?
So he found the numbers.
Yeah, that's right. So he found numbers. What were the numbers on? It was something from that kill site that he had at the beginning of the movie, and
Yeah, the numbers were on the tree, and then that was kind
that's
of
right.
triggering his memory of
Yes,
the
because
horse
he
with the
had a
numbers.
yeah, because he had like this horse, like this like wooden carved horse that had those numbers on the bottom, and it was on the tree, and so yeah, it was triggering those memories, which he's a replicant, so he believes that.
So what sent him out to the junkyard area was he was looking up for some reason he found the two DNA that were exactly the same that were at this like orphanage. And so he was going out there to find that orphanage. But I don't
Yes,
remember
that's right.
exactly what sent him there.
Yeah, but I remember watching it at the time, and it made sense. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have a
yeah. That
problem
was
with
I
it.
didn't
So
think it was
yeah,
confusing
yeah.
there.
I just don't remember the specific detail.
Right.
So he goes out there and realizes that this, like, once he gets inside the place, it's like the place that he keeps having in his memory from whenever he was a little kid, which he knows or he assumes before this that these are just planted memories because that's what
Right.
robots have. So he goes and finds this place where in his memory he put this like wooden horse. And so he goes and it's there. And so he figures that he's the person in this memory and that he actually had a childhood, which sort of like hints that he might be the kid
Right.
that
Or
he's looking for.
he at least thinks this.
Right.
He
Right.
seems to be he's definitely conflicted, because he's always asking his AI girlfriend, like, how do you know if a memory is real or not? You know what I mean? Like, he's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
positive if even if this thing is real, he's still not positive if it's his or not.
Right. And I have a quick question, sidebar, about that, about his AI girlfriend. What is that?
What do you mean?
I didn't understand. So I may have just missed something really, really simplistic that everyone else understood, and I missed it though. Probably in my tired state.
Yeah.
So in the house at the first part of the movie, his AI girlfriend is like a hologram, which makes sense because there's a little thing on a track on the ceiling that
Yep.
follows around, and that made total sense. Then he's like, "Hey, guess what? Got an upgrade. Now you're in this thing." And then she's just standing around with
Right.
no
It was
track or lights.
I forgot what the name of it was, but it was I can't remember what the name of it was. But yeah, it was just
Yeah.
a little thing that could project within some, area or something.
Well, that's what I didn't understand because at first I was like, oh, well, maybe this is like AR. So it's like something, well, because he's a robot, it like loaded up into him and he can just see her wherever.
No, cuz other people could see her, right?
Right, right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what made me question that. So that's why I was trying to figure out, well, how is anyone else seeing her? Because I thought that's what it was for the longest time. I
No,
don't
I
know.
think it's just that thing has to be in the area and it can project in some sort of bubble.
Gotcha. Okay.
Obviously, they're pretty good at projection cuz, as you walk around the wet streets of LA, there's
Yes.
holograms just everywhere.
Right, right. Okay, fair enough. I was just trying to figure that out. I didn't understand it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyways, so back to the story. So this leads him to try and figure out if his memories are false. I think that was kind of the next step. And so he goes to someone who's like one of the best, who's said to have been like the best like memory creator for these androids.
Right.
Talks to her, shows she looks at the memory that he's talking about. They both start crying. He gets mad and he's like, now I know it's real. Leaves. And then what is it? He goes off to find Harrison Ford, essentially, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah,
Next,
he's trying to track down Harrison Ford. Like, he goes
and
to Mr. Mustache Man, right?
that's right. That's right.
And
Okay.
yeah, I had a question about him. So what was the origami that he made? I thought it was a bull, and so I was like, I was
Um,
waiting for there to be some, some meaning somewhere in the movie about what that origami animal was, but then
yeah.
it never
Okay.
really paid off. And then, like, I saw somewhere else, I was reading a bunch of stuff, and somebody said they thought it was a sheep, so they thought it was just a nod to
No,
the
I
original
vaguely remember that scene.
book.
I remember thinking it's not, but I don't know. Um,
Okay.
but anyways, so yeah,
This is
so
one of
he
those movies
goes.
where I feel like every little thing has some sort of, like, at least attempt at a meaning.
What was the connection to Harrison Ford? I remember there was one, but I forget like why was he saying like he was going to look for him?
Um, he went to the Wallace Corporation, like, archives, and they found that glass shard thing, and they watched a little bit of the scene of him giving the test in the first
Yeah,
Blade Runner. So that
right.
was that was the connection to Harrison Ford.
Gotcha. Okay, so he goes to find Harrison Ford, for the character Deckard from the first movie, who lives in like an abandoned,
Las
um,
Vegas.
yeah, Las Vegas. That's right. And so he finds him. They get in a scuffle. It's kind of fun, and they talk. And Ryan Gosling hints at the fact that like he has a kid. Like, why wouldn't you want to find the kid? And here's my next question.
Hmm.
I feel like and I will fully put myself out there if this is stupid and makes no sense. I feel like it's just assumed that Harrison Ford is a robot, but that didn't completely make sense to me either.
No, that was one of the things I thought was so amazing about this was it perpetuated the forever sort of unknownness of whether or not Deckard is a replicant, which I thought was amazing because it works both ways.
Yeah.
Like they clearly gave hints that he was a replicant, but it could absolutely still work that he's not.
The only thing that I thought was like a strong hint that he was later on in the movie, whenever he's captive and that other female robot is, he's like, "Where are we going?" And she says, "Home." And again, that could be taken either way, but it seemed like she was saying it for both of them. Which
Oh,
home
yeah.
would be where the robots were made, Mars or wherever, because they weren't made on Earth originally.
I didn't catch that one. I mean, the big one was like Wallace was when he's doing one of his monologue things, he was saying something
Yeah,
like,
that was
"What
great.
makes you think that it wasn't designed that you were going to fall in love with her?"
Right.
And it was kind of like the implication. And I think whether he's a replicant or not, I think Wallace is speculating. I don't think he knows either.
Yeah.
Because if he did, he would, he's been trying to figure out how to breed basically these replicants for a long time. So he's probably been studying all this stuff and he's like thinking that, oh, maybe that was the trick there, something like that.
Before getting to that point, then we, like while Ryan Gosling and him are together in Vegas. Sounds like a funny movie.
Yeah,
but
that sounds amazing.
Harrison and Ford and Ryan Gosling in Vegas. But anyways, they are attacked because the female replicant that's been tracking him from the Wallace Corporation, like they track him down and they attack them. And then ironically, which I wasn't expecting, they took Harrison Ford and they just left.
Right. Which kind of was that like, oh, you don't even matter. Like, we're just going to leave you to die here.
Right. Like he had
Ryan
led
Gosling.
them to where they needed to go, I guess.
Right. That was his purpose for them.
Yeah. Or rather, like they figured out like, well, this is the, see, I was trying to figure out why they took him at first, but then it made sense. Like they took him because they figured out through Joe's tracking down of this guy that he was the alleged father of whatever this kid is that they're looking for. So,
or at least understands what's going on here better than anybody
and so
else.
They're going to interrogate him and try to figure out information one way or the other. So they took him, and so Harrison Ford is taken per the scene that you were just describing a minute ago. He's being interrogated and monologued to death, and and Joe's back in Las Vegas, and like all these people show up, and I guess they're replicants that are going to start a revolution, which is also interesting because that never had a payoff on screen.
Yeah, that was one of those things where while it was happening, I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. And then after the fact, it was kind of like, this isn't a movie where I want it to break out into big war. Like, I almost kind of wish it was a little more like on the Children of Men scale, like small scale, we're trying to hide this precious thing rather than it be like, we're trying to hide this precious thing so that it can help us lead a revolution. It felt a little like...
Yeah.
Whoa.
Hold on a second.
Is that Mr. Frodo?
Hey.
Wouldn't be an episode of A-Town without an interruption from the official dog of A-Town, Mr. Frodo.
It's funny. As soon as I started walking in there, he like runs from the window and slinks underneath the chair. Anyways, so it was interesting though, because there's this threat that I guess robots are planning on killing people or taking something over, but I like that though, because
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it's not outside of this world even remotely. Like, that is how the first Blade Runner started, right? Was that text had a thing about a replicant revolution, and the whole idea of these new replicants was that they were supposed to be more docile, and they had fail-safes in place, like that test that they kept giving Kay to like make sure that kind of thing can't happen again.
Right. And what makes this like unique though is like I like that this movie wasn't about like an action
Yeah,
war, like androids taking over anything. Like it wasn't focusing on that, even though that's kind of clearly in play.
right. Like you could easily see a sort of War of the Planet of the Apes scenario where they make this movie and executives are like, "Oh, well, I don't know that we can really sell this. Can you add just one scene where there's sort of a fight? It doesn't even have to be big, and then that's
Yeah.
all we'll show in the ads because that'll put
Hmm.
butts in seats." And like
Right.
they, through whoever it was, they sort of resisted that urge, which I think is actually kind of hurting them. From what I understand, this is actually doing very poorly.
Is it really?
Yeah, which is sort of really depressing.
I
Like,
thought it would have been huge. Like I thought
yeah,
people would
so
know what it
my
was.
theater was like very, very empty, but they're doing
Mine wasn't
construction
full.
at ours. So I thought, oh, maybe it's just because of that. But I've seen a bunch of articles about how they're calling it a bomb. I don't know if that's the most fair. I think it's a bomb relative to its budget.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of people tend to use that without it actually being official. And not to mention like you never know how these things are going to do in overseas markets cuz especially with a lot of this like there's a lot of like Asian influence in
Right.
the design of this
And
and
a, Canadian French director.
yeah. So, I mean, there could be other stuff in other audiences, but it's
Well,
not
and
tech
like
now
a lot
correct me
of
if I'm
times,
wrong.
whenever you have really good reviews, that can give it legs.
Yeah.
So, like,
Right.
if
And it
enough
does.
people sort of proselytize it, you could see it sort of gaining traction. It also depends on what comes out in the next couple weekends,
Right. And
and I
this
don't
is
really know.
yeah, at least just based on critic reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at 89% right
Yeah,
now.
I was kind of bummed when I saw it drop below 90.
It's still pretty good though.
Yo, yeah, yeah. Especially for a sort of I mean, I almost call it art house, which is totally unfair, but
Audience score is 84,
oh, really?
which means that a lot of the fans still liked it.
Right. But it's a little bit of a hard sell just because it's so long and
Yeah. It's not an
it
action
kind of
movie.
requires you to watch the original,
Yes, it does.
and it wasn't advertised as this high intense action movie at all. Which
Right,
is
and
I
it
think
wasn't.
what made it so super appealing to me. Like I thought the ads were amazing. The one trailer that I saw, I was like, "Well, I guess I'm seeing that, and I guess I'm going to watch the original beforehand because that looks
Right.
amazing."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it'll do better though. I'm sure it will. I mean, I would imagine they'll make their money back on it at least, which is why I hate it when people just throw around that term bomb
Right.
whenever.
Well, so I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but it was like 100 or 200 something million budget, and like opening night or something was like 10 million or 12 million or something. Like it was
Oh, okay.
way low compared to a lot of movies
Gotcha.
in this like budget range, from what I
Well,
understand.
we'll have to see the whole weekend.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. The weekend's not over yet.
right.
We can go see it 3 more times ourselves.
Right.
We got
um,
9 hours.
Now you know how I felt about John Carter. No, just kidding. It's not in the same category. Um, but
Is
anyways,
that Phillip K Dick? No, that's not. Is it?
no,
Okay.
no, that's Edgar Rice Burroughs, the creator of Tarzan. Um,
Okay.
yeah, much older. That was like a 19 single digits
Gotcha.
book. Yeah. Um, so yeah,
Okay, so
so
continuing on your sort of walking us through the plot here.
yeah, so he meets these robots that are saying they're going to start a revolution, but not yet. And they encourage him like something about we can actually, do our own thing and be autonomous. They wanted us to like be more obedient, but we can have kids and stuff, and that means that we should have our own autonomy. And so they kind of convince him like you need to do the right thing and you need to kill Harrison Ford so that they can't get any information out of him or anything like that. So
Right.
they send him off to do that. He kind of like waffles on it, you can tell.
Has his
And then
little emotional walk through the rain.
so yeah, so Ryan Gosling is sent off to go kill him. He waffles about it, decides that he's gonna go do
Yeah,
it,
well,
and
and like We haven't really talked about this yet, but that moment where he sees the big projection of joy,
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. And like there's a lot like kind of to unpack in that whole relationship that's kind of interesting that works with the themes of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
But that moment specifically where, he sees the like obscene naked, which is kind of annoying, joy projection up there, and you can tell in his head he's just like, oh, this is like just the fake version, not the real one. And then
Yeah.
when it leans down and calls him, you're a good Joe,
Yeah.
it was this sort of like sickening realization of like, oh, that was just programmed into her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like it doesn't say, nothing in this movie says like that relationship wasn't real,
Hmm.
but that was just like one of those weird little data points to make your brain think a certain way. And
Yeah. And
that was kind of the
that's
moment where he made the decision to sort of follow his pseudo orders from the
yeah.
revolutionaries.
Yeah, and that's a theme that like the book and the first movie played with too, was like this like graying of the lines or blending of the lines between like um or like what's real and not,
Right. What
and
is
like
my
what's really
decision
the
and what's
difference.
programmed, and yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done and
Yeah,
interesting.
definitely.
But anyway, so moving on. So
Yeah,
he has
so
his walk through the
basically
rain.
we get to the end of the movie, kind of the finale. So he decides he's going to go and track down Harrison Ford, and so they're torturing Harrison Ford in the Wallace Corporation, and they say like, I have off-world things that'll get you to talk. Convenient. And
Yeah, that
and
one, that was
so
a little ham-fisted feeling.
yeah, and so they put him in one of the flying cars, and they're taking him to the shuttle to like go off world, and Ryan Gosling attacks, and car spins out, I guess like under a bypass of some sort. That's what I'm
Right,
gonna
some
call
sort
it.
of dam or something. Yeah.
Yeah, as the car's like sinking and Harrison Ford is still cuffed, like he's fighting the robot from the Wallace Corporation, kills her, saves Harrison Ford. And I mean, I guess it's pertinent to know that earlier in the movie, it's revealed that that Ryan Gosling finds out through talking to those robots from earlier that told him to go kill Harrison Ford, that he is not actually the kid that he was looking for as he thought he was, because of the memory, and he found the horse that seemed to match and confirm
Right.
it. He finds out that the person that he went to find out about whether the memory was real was actually Harrison Ford's daughter. So she's actually the one that was born.
Yeah, she had been sort of adopted by like a rich family and was told that she had some disease to put her in that bubble,
Right.
which sort of just kind of shielded her from everything. And
Which
then,
also means she may not know. And then,
yeah, that's an interesting, like, they didn't really answer that, which I'm kind of glad they didn't. But yeah, you don't
yeah,
know if she knows or not, but you do know that that memory was her memory that sort of leaked into memories that she was creating for others.
right, right.
Now, one of interesting implication there is like, if she does know, has she been doing that on purpose to try and like, is she sort of trying to subvert the system a little bit by giving replicants these memories that might
Bad
lead them
memories.
places to
Yeah,
have their own understanding so that they then realize that they can be more than their programming? Like, is she using her position to sort of help
yeah,
drive this realization of these new replicants that
right,
they can be human or more human,
right, right.
which is,
Yeah,
yeah,
so,
I that's just a cool sort of dynamic.
yeah, it was an interesting open question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he saves Harrison Ford from the drowning car, kills the other robot, and to our surprise, he's not killing Harrison Ford. He says something to the effect of like, well, let's just say you're dead. And so I guess they're going to pretend that, he killed him and did his job, and he's going to go and take him to his daughter. And it's kind of where the movie ends, is
Yeah,
like
he
he
has
takes him to
his
see his daughter.
tears in the snow moment
Yeah.
as he dies, or I think he dies.
No monologue though.
Yes, yeah. We didn't get a poem, although they did play the music, like the musical cues from that moment in the original
Yeah.
at that moment, which was
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah, so that was the movie, and it didn't like. I mean, yes, there was a fight at the end, but it wasn't like this big like action-packed blow it out finale
Yeah.
to it or anything, which
Although
was a
the action scenes that were in it, I thought were really good.
yeah, there were even just moments that were just like sort of horrifying. Like earlier in the movie, there's a scene where the Wallace Corporation female replicant is like she's trying to get some stuff out of like I don't know, like a lockbox or something. I forget. I don't even know what she was getting that for,
She was getting the
to be
bones.
honest.
Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
she
Okay,
took
yeah.
the bones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so she took that, and this like guy comes in. He's like, "Hey, you're not supposed to do that." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And so like he starts like putting stuff away, and she just like you just hear this like impact to
Yeah.
like the back of his
Yeah, that
neck,
was
and just like
brutal.
blood just comes out the front orifices of his face, and it was just like horrifying. Like just the crunch and all
See,
of
the
it was just
one
like perfectly.
so like I really liked her, that character. I think her name was Love,
Yeah,
which interesting that the two female robots are Love and Joy.
right.
I'm sure there's something to that. But her, she was just like horrifying as a character, I felt like. But my favorite scene with her was when she was when she killed the chief or the police officer, Robin White's character,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
she
Like
like I forgot what
crushed the
she said.
glass in
I
her.
just remember like whatever she was saying, I found myself suddenly get like I tensed up. Like I think
Hmm.
her voice cracked all of a sudden, and
Well,
like this sort of facade.
she said something like I'm going something about like threaten to kill her right now, and we're not supposed to lie, so they'll just believe me, sort of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was sort of this like, holy cow! Like she's sort of broken out a little bit too. Which there was a couple other moments like that, but
Which
then
that's an interesting thing because like if the whole thing is like these things like start to like kind of click or something like that whenever some sort of my theory is going to be serious trauma because in the case of like seeing a miracle, which is what they said earlier in the movie, like that
right,
sort of makes sense. And then it also makes sense because it seemed like she clicked whenever he killed that other uh, female robot. The
yeah,
Wallace
like you
killed that
saw a
female
tear come out
robot
of
in
her
front of her.
eye, and it was this
Yeah,
sort of like, whoa. I
yeah. And
think part
unless
of
I
it was
slept through a
she's.
larger portion than I thought, I didn't miss anything, and that was her moment that she like sort of turned.
See, that's interesting. I didn't really think of it like it was a moment thing. I thought maybe it was time because that was how it worked with the old ones, right? Was that like the longer replicant was alive, the more it sort of had time to like gather emotions, which is why they had those like
Oh, that makes sense.
lifespans on them that
Yeah,
were short. And then because Wallace thought at least that he solved that problem, they got rid of that lifespan limit.
yeah,
And I think he didn't quite solve the problem. He just limited it. And then that's why they had those tests, which that was, I
yeah.
really
That makes
thought that was
sense.
cool, that whole test thing. But
I don't understand it, but sure.
well, I mean, it kind of made sense. It was like you're asking a bunch of things that should elicit an emotional response,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
as long as you don't
Well,
have them.
that was what the long form, the Voight comp test in the first one was too.
Yeah, yeah. I just thought this was a cool way of doing a sort of more
Yeah,
streamlined version of the same thing.
right, right.
But but yeah, like as these things had time, and especially Love, because like she was given a name and she was really close to the creator, so she
Hmm.
even was more like I think emotionally attached to Wallace, and then seeing that Wallace didn't even care at all about replicants, the way he
Yeah,
just sort of like murders that one coldly. I thought that was why she was crying. Was this
yeah,
sort of like slight devastation of like a emotional crisis in her mind of like I thought maybe we were important, but this is sort of confirming that we're not.
right, right.
But I don't know. But I mean the idea that you're saying makes sense too, like a specific instance could trigger it.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. Maybe you are right. It could be gradual, and that was just like. Well, I guess that's what I mean. Is it was just like the instance that was kind of like, okay, well, I'm doing this on my own now.
Right. But
um,
whenever she grabbed her hand with that glass and then shattered the glass like into her hand, the officer,
right.
that to me was like that to me had more impact than hitting the guy in the back of the head. Something about that was just like holy cow.
Yeah,
And then Robin Wright, whenever she was just like, well, just do what you have to do. It was like I don't know, that was almost like the movie Heat. whenever Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are talking to each other. It had that feeling of it to me.
Never seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a good movie, but that scene in particular is, what it's probably most well known for, because it's like these two guys with opposing goals that understand each other and sort of almost respect each other. And that was what that moment felt like in this movie, where it was like both of them sort of were like, well, at least Robin Wright. I don't know that Love really respected Robin Wright at all, but it was this sort of like, well, we all got to do what we got to do. Like, you're just going to kill me, so let's just go ahead and do this. I just thought that was a really cool scene.
So here's my next question. What is Joy from the Wallace Corporation? What's her end goal here? Like, if she clearly has motivations other than the Wallace Corporation now, is she trying to retrieve the kid so that they can so that they can do the birth thing? And...
You mean Love?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You said Joy.
That's what I meant.
I think you said Joy.
Well, nonetheless, that's my question, because it seems like her views are contrary.
I think she's still just like, her goal is still to do what the Wallace Corporation wants. You know what I mean? Like, she has a good position there, and whether or not she's acting in her own self-interest or according to programming is almost like both goals are the same, I feel like, for her.
Yeah.
But you could potentially see a scenario where she flips, but she didn't.
Exactly.
And I think it makes sense why she didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So let me see if I have any other questions or concerns. Yeah. Okay. I think I've forgotten all my questions out. So, what do you have?
So let's see. There was one question that I feel like was commonly asked. Oh, unlike most every other movie we've done, because for whatever reason this movie just really gnawed on my brain for a really long time afterwards. Normally, whenever we watch these, I will avoid reading anything or listening to anything about them until we record, because I don't want it to just be, me rehashing what other people are saying, right?
Right.
But I couldn't on this one, because I was just... Honestly, this is similar to, weirdly, because this other movie is not nearly in the same, like, cerebral style, but, like, whenever episode 7 came out of Star Wars, I had the same thing where it was like, for like a week, I was on the Star Wars subreddit just reading every theory that could possibly be out there. And I've kind of been like that on this, where I've just been on the Blade Runner subreddit, like, absorbing everybody's thoughts and theories, and there's just so much like stuff in here that is interesting. And because of the style, and I think because it's expected, because it's Blade Runner, it's almost, they were allowed to do more of this, where it's like they didn't have to answer a lot of stuff. They could just leave a lot of questions open, because part of the fun of Blade Runner is that argument afterwards of like, what's really happening here? And, is this what they meant to do, or is this what they meant to do? But one thing I've seen frequently asked there is, there was a lot of confusion around the like twins thing. So you know how he looks up, there's two kids in this orphanage with the exact same DNA.
Yeah.
And the girl supposedly died, but the boy was the one that was still alive. I took that whole thing to mean that the girl was put in there so that she was in the system, but they, like, as a way to try and throw everybody off in the future, they, like, said, oh no, actually they, like, duplicated her records and made her a boy, and then just said, oh, this other one died, because I guess you couldn't delete it or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so it was just like a thing in there to try and throw off people trying to find this girl. That was all I thought about it. I didn't really think that much about it until I read all these people talking about it. But afterwards, I was like, I guess I can see how that was confusing.
I don't think any records were changed unless there was a clear thing that had that in the movie. I think it was just like one of the twins died, and they were just like, oh, the boy lived, cut her hair short, sort of thing.
Oh, like you think there was actually twins?
Yeah.
Interesting. But they had the 100% same DNA.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that.
Which, I mean, so I guess like Ryan Gosling said when he saw that, he goes, they have the same DNA. This isn't possible. So I took that to mean like okay, in this universe, you can't have people with the same DNA, even replicants. But then there's no record in that universe of a replicant having babies. So I guess theoretically, you could have a baby with the exact same DNA.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like to me it makes sense there was just like but is the movie thinking of that? Because it certainly
Because
could be something that's left.
they never like gave any indication that there was more than one. Like
Yeah, that's true.
Harrison Ford always referred to it as the child. Everybody always referred to it as the child.
Yeah, that's probably right. I don't know. Yeah, and there was only one child in the picture of the baby.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was another one that confused people because people thought that that was the what's her name, Rachel from the original, who's the mom.
No. Yeah,
But
I
yeah, I
didn't
thought
think that.
clearly it didn't look like her to me. So
Oh, well. Yeah, so oh, so it's just some person holding.
it was the lady with like an eye missing from the Revolution.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, got no problem with that. um
So so I just want there's a couple different like areas that I kind of wanted to ask you about. The first one is what did you think of the whole Joy K relationship and like storyline?
I didn't really care too much about it, but I understood the angle they were going with it for like as far as thematically and it was, a technology that was worth exploring and they did it all fine. I just wasn't heavily invested in it because to me the whole time I was one of the audience members in the frame of mind of like, oh, well, this is all programmed. There's nothing real here.
See, and like to me it totally worked. And I was very like invested and like I found the interactions between them two like really engaging. Like whenever the ship gets shot, and she was sitting in the
Yeah.
passenger seat and she starts sort of glitching and like screaming and she
Yeah.
sort of after it crashes, she's like outside of it sort of screaming trying to get him to wake up. I found that like sort of really really intense and like it was like okay, she really seems to care about him. Like obviously this could all be fake, but it
Right.
really does feel like this is a real thing. But then they kept having those random moments where she would sort of like lean in and whisper in his ear like, "See, you are special.
Right.
You are a special snowflake." And
Yeah.
that's where you'd have that doubt of like, "Oh, is this just the programming? Like she's just doing what he wants, telling him what he wants to hear all the time."
I don't see like I think okay, what is that? I don't want to say it's the Turing test, but like I guess something like that. I never felt like she did anything that would be clearly human.
The biggest one was she sort of sacrificed herself. Because they said that a lot, like sacrificing
Yeah.
yourself for someone else is the most human thing you can do. That was a line that they said a lot,
But
and
did
they
she
made a
do
big
that? She just got killed.
but
That's
they made
all.
a big point about her saying,
Yeah,
"You
I
need to
know.
take me out of the system," and he's like, "No, if I do that, then this is it, and you'll die if this thing breaks." And she's
Yeah.
like, "No, to protect you, I'm going to do that." To me, that would be against her programming, right? Because the people programming it wouldn't want you to like disconnect from the system so that they can no longer contact that thing. You know what I mean?
I I don't know. I mean, I guess I just felt
I
like
don't think it's like clear cut. I'm just saying like that to me was especially because of how heavily they pounded in the to sacrifice your own life is the most human thing you can do.
right. Which, by the way, is a pretty like it's fine for the movie, but it's also like
Well, yeah, it's a lame obvious like obviously that's not a
platitude
real
or
test. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But
But
like I mean, I feel like what was interesting was it was very easy for us, especially because the main character was obviously a replicant from the beginning, is easy for us to be like, okay, this person's real,
yeah.
right? And like the sort of like prostitute replicant,
Mm-hmm.
she was like real. I'm doing air quotes, but then
Yeah.
the AI, the prostitute girl treated her like, oh, but she's not real.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're the same exact thing. They're just programs. It's just one of them has like a physical form. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they're all it's just a program. And I thought that was like this was a good way to sort of maintain those themes of what makes you real, what makes you human,
Hmm.
by taking it one layer deeper and saying, okay, you've accepted that the replicant can be real. Will you accept that the AI that doesn't actually have a body can be real? Even though there's literally no
Right.
reason for you to treat those differently.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And so it was a really, really compelling, interesting, like,
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like that was interesting to me, but as far as the character herself, I
you didn't
personally never
find their
felt.
chemistry,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no,
yeah,
no.
and
I
that
get.
totally worked for me.
Yeah, I get that part of it that you just explained. I'm just saying, like, I never got to a point where I was like, oh, she really, because everything was like always like affirming statements and positivity. There was never like any arguments or disagreement, which would have made more sense to me as far as like
Other than
breaking.
sort of she wanted him to take him in the little machine, and he was like, no, that'll, like, you'll die if this thing breaks, and she's like, no, you need to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But that, I mean, it wasn't a super strong thing.
Right.
Have you seen the movie Her?
I still haven't yet. They just put it back up on HBO, so I might watch it.
Oh man, yeah. Maybe we should do like a review of that too, because I would totally like to see that again. I honestly, that might be one of the reasons it worked for me so well, was because I was bringing in the experience of Her is very, very
Yeah,
similar, and I brought a lot of that, like, I don't want to say baggage, but you know what I mean. Those
yeah,
ideas and thoughts immediately. I was like, oh, this is like this, and all those themes sort of were bouncing around in my head, and so
yeah,
I may have treated that a lot different because I've seen that movie.
yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I do plan on watching that though. I've always wanted to. I just haven't seen it
It's one of
yet.
those movies where it's like, to me, it's a good, sort of. I don't want to call it a romantic comedy because it's not funny, but you know what I mean. Like, it's an
Yeah,
interesting drama on its own, and then the way that it does science fiction is amazing and totally in its own class. So even if you could care
yeah,
less about the stories or characters, like, I just like watching the world that it created because it is completely unique from anything I've ever seen.
yeah. I've heard it's a good movie. I just haven't. Yeah, I mean, I never rented it, and so
Yeah,
it's not
I ended
really.
up renting it, or maybe it was on Netflix or something. Uh,
I don't go to those old school video factories like you do.
yeah.
I got Redbox or streaming, and if it's not on either, then I
Oh,
don't
I
see
think I
it.
streamed it. I don't remember though. It was a while ago.
Yeah, yeah. It was gone for a while, but like I said, it should be back on HBO now. I actually added it to my to watch list, so
Nice.
I had planned on it anyway.
So, what did you think about the music?
The music was all right. I mean, I like the random like how do you say it? I like that there were parts of it that had like an electronic-y 80s
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi sort of soundtrack, but overall, the music as a whole wasn't very like there wasn't a lot going for it. I realized it was Hans Zimmer, but to me, I felt like this was how you typically characterize Hans Zimmer,
Yep.
and I feel like you're gonna say something else.
No. So like in my sort of notes,
Lots of car revving sounds in the
yeah.
soundtrack,
So
which
the
was weird.
opening to the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, this music is so good because it was just like super interesting and loud, and like there was, whenever it had a theme, it was so, and part of that was just the visuals were unbelievable, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing is there's some really good themes in it. It's just
exactly.
like it's like, well, we're only going to do this theme for 30 seconds and
Exact
then call it
yes.
quits.
And that was my thing. It was like the music to me was some of the best soundtrack I've heard this year. But
Yeah,
there was
as a
tiny brief
whole.
moments of it. And the whole time I'm like, "Oh, here we go. This is it. This is amazing." And then it would just drop back down into your wall of sound. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it wasn't this whole time I thought that the music was done by I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Johannesburg, or Johannesburg, however you say his name, the guy who's done the other music with Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah.
But so the whole movie, I'm like, man, it feels like he's almost dropping into this sort of Hans Zimmer style, and I was getting like annoyed at it. But I
Mm.
probably wouldn't have been annoyed at it if it hadn't had these little like elements of greatness, and then
Yeah.
they drop away. And then afterwards, when I'm looking stuff up, I was like, oh, apparently they dropped the Johann guy and
Yeah.
replaced him with Hans Zimmer. And I was like, oh, well, okay, I guess that all makes sense. And
Yeah.
it was like peak Hans Zimmer, where it was like he's the best at doing that, I feel like. But
Mhm.
I really wanted there to be more.
Yeah.
And when there
Yeah,
it was awesome.
I kind of cheated a little bit though because I listened to the soundtrack like when it came out on Friday. So
Ah, yeah.
and so like I had already was just focusing on the music alone and was just like, well,
Oh,
there's some really
especially if you're
cool
just
stuff
focusing on the
every
music
other
alone.
minute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've actually listened to it a decent amount afterwards. Like when I drove home, I listened to it, and then um, yesterday while I was doing some stuff, I put it on, and it was that
Yeah.
same thing where it's like every once in a while I'd notice it because something interesting would happen, and it was really good, and then it would drop back down into just noise, which again
Yeah.
worked with the movie fine. Like
Yeah.
it's not like while I was watching it, it bothered me. It was just it felt like it could have been so much more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Now, the visuals, on the other hand, were unbelievable to me.
Yeah, I don't. I always struggle. Like, it's a certain type of like visual thing that like I try. It's hard to explain, and I never am good at it. But it's like everything felt very like even though you're clearly seeing a lot of CGI stuff, it never felt like it. Everything felt very grounded and lived in,
Yeah, like grungy, and
and yeah. Whereas
it
like in
felt
the
like
old
everything
Blade
was a set.
Runner, they built a lot of the sets. Like that's what this felt like, whether they did or not. So
I think they did do a decent amount of sets, but obviously lots of CG too.
right.
But like not just the visual effects though, because those almost in the same way as Blade Runner, where like it was actually doing a lot, but it felt reserved
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't stuff just like crazy happening. The camera angles always felt, you know, uh, like they were doing something that a real camera could do.
Right.
But the cinematography and specifically the like lighting, it felt like
Mm-hmm.
every single frame of this movie was was concept art.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it just looked so awesome, and I really loved how they kept the Los Angeles like blue tones,
Mm-hmm.
but then whenever they went to Las Vegas, everything
The
was wrapped in
reds.
this just crazy orange red. It
Yeah.
felt like Blade Runner, but like with
Mm-hmm.
a complete, it was like you took Blade Runner and just changed the color scheme,
Yeah.
but like it had all the same other elements to it. Instead of rain, it was dense fog and dust,
Yeah.
and everything was like sort of gigantic, even though there was no people there. It felt like,
Mm-hmm.
they had all the giant statues, and so they somehow made Las Vegas have that same feel of the dense, crowded, futuristic
And then
Los
everything cheap.
Angeles.
And then everything cheap and commercial is all like pinks and pastels and
Yeah, yeah.
over
And
the
like
top.
the other thing I thought was cool was, and we talked about this in the last episode, like the original Blade Runner, all of its future technology was grounded in the reality of that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like use payphones instead of cell phones and whatever. And this one, I feel like they projected farther into the future, but they kept the baseline the same. So
Yeah.
like Las Vegas had like all these like record players that look like, or like jukeboxes, but they still had like the holograms on top. But it was all sort of like semi based around this 70s, 80s like origin point.
Right. Yeah.
And like nobody really had like cell phones. I think there was somebody that had sort of had a tablet thing, but there was
Yeah. Things
still
were
that like,
well because yeah, and it also makes sense with the story too. Like we said with the last one, like because it's like a lot of humanity's been devastated in the ecosystem and everything, so it's not a prosperous future. It's a struggling future,
right.
even with the robots.
It was cool though that this was like things are turning around. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
solved the farming problem, and so and like Las Vegas used to be this big nuclear fallout, and the radiation has like finally sort of subsided.
Right.
It feels like Earth could actually kind of grow back out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not this like humanity is dying and this is the end,
Or
which is kind of
millions of
cool.
planets with the proper workforce.
Yeah, yeah,
Only colonized 9.
yeah. So this
Isn't that
was,
what he said?
yeah. He
Yeah,
said we've
right.
gotten to 9 planets so far.
Which doesn't make sense to me. I want to know what the other planets were. Are they all in our solar system? Because we have some gas giants that I feel like you can't.
Yeah, maybe you got out of the solar system.
Yeah, that would
Or
make
they
sense.
created some planets. Who knows?
Yeah.
Hey, this was in the 80s, so Pluto still counts as a planet, right? So they got that
Right.
guy. Maybe they just lowered their standards and they're counting a couple.
Isn't and then but Jupiter and Saturn are gas giants, I think. And
I
then
believe
you
that's
got
true.
like Venus and Mercury, and one of those two doesn't have a atmosphere.
Venus has an atmosphere, but it's like toxic. Mercury does not have an atmosphere.
I only know this, by the way, because I went to the planetarium yesterday.
Oh yeah, I was like,
I
man, you
wouldn't have
really.
known it. I
I didn't know
wouldn't have
we were allowed
known
to
it.
go into space here. Like this
Yeah,
opens
yeah,
up a
yeah.
whole new section of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Just showing off what I learned
Yeah,
yesterday.
yeah.
Me and the other 5-year-old at his house telling his parents.
But yeah, the visuals in this, both the cinematography, the and just the general direction of all that, made me. I am now very, very excited about Dune.
Yeah, especially Las Vegas, the red colors and the
Oh
sand and all
man,
that.
yeah. Well, like obviously it's going to look different, right? But
Yeah.
like Dennis, actually, it's Denis. You know what? So we talked about this in
Denis.
the last episode, but the New York Times had like a little.
How to say his name?
Well, it wasn't that specifically, but he opens this little video that they did by saying what his name is, and it was not at all what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
let's see.
it's like exactly how you say an American accent. Denise Vanillier. And it's just like that's how he says it.
Well,
Denny B.
let's see. Blade Runner.
My name is Denis Villeneuve, and I'm the director of Blade Runner 2049.
Denis Villeneuve. He says, "My name is Denis Villeneuve." I think.
Sounds French. Yeah.
Yeah, Denis Villeneuve. Okay.
Well, you
We
heard
got
it
it.
here first. The
Yeah.
correct pronunciation. The world will now be able to identify him.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so he did Arrival, and then he did this, and then he's going to do Dune.
He did Arrival. He did Sicario.
That's right. That's right. Sicario.
And
that was his other big claim to fame.
yeah, so Sicario, I actually just recently watched finally. That one also got me excited about Dune. Weirdly, because it's not the type of movie where you'd expect that. But like, there were these like helicopter shots in that movie, paired with that Johannesburg music.
Yeah.
That like he made I forget what the Mexican town that takes place in. He made that feel otherworldly.
Yeah.
Like it was amazing.
Yeah.
Like the way that he's also like he does really interesting things with contrast. Like he crushes it to where there's like almost no contrast, and like blacks are just totally gone, and all of your whites are blown out. Like his movies are not going to be remotely better once they get HDR because he doesn't want that dynamic range. But it makes everything look really cool and kind of unique.
What'll be the hard thing? Like I am excited about him doing Dune. But the hard thing that's always been with Dune is that the world building is hard to introduce people to. So like you still need to watch the David Lynch movie because there are parts
I might
of it
as well
that are...
start with the new one though, right?
Yeah, no.
Why? Why would I want to have a bad introduction to this world that you like?
Well, because here. Listen. You have never read the book, so what I have heard is for people that are really into David Lynch type movies, which I'm not saying you are, but you can appreciate different directors. And
yeah, but I would say I'm definitely not into David Lynch specifically.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that what I have heard, which I can't confirm this because I'm on the other side of it, but I'm in a weird middle ground. But what I have heard is that people that never read the books and like David Lynch, like love that movie, but people, which would have been the overwhelming amount of people that went to see it, that had read the books, they were like, "What is this?" Like, because the first 5 minutes is pretty much the book, and then all of a sudden it just goes a whole different direction, and it's weird. So I say all that to say, like, it's actually like production wise, it's very interesting. But no, the hard part is the world building because like even in his the old David Lynch one, he just throws all of this crap at you within like a 5-minute thing. And for anybody that's read the book, you're like, yep, got it. And anybody else is just like, well, wait a minute, what's this weird looking octopus thing swimming around in a tank, and what does that have to do with space travel? And the fact that I just said that out loud to you, you're probably like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, that all makes sense.
yeah, no, I got it.
Yeah, that's all I need to hear.
I drew a diagram. Send it to me now.
Yeah, it's a CAD drawing.
Yeah, so it's complicated to introduce and get people into the world. And on top of that, there's like this sort of political potboiler type thing going on with part of it, as well as it gets into like this mysticism sort of plot point. But yeah, like it's very like there's parts of it that feel very Game of Thrones-ish, to where there's like plots on plots and it's political, and there's different families that have very different, they have sigils and they have houses.
But the thing about like that, for example, is that type of thing works way better as a TV show.
Yes.
And a movie needs to work differently. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
which
so,
is why I'm wondering what he's going to do with that, because that's the hard part.
Agreed.
Is pleasing the fans, and then also.
And I feel like your two options to do it successfully with a movie are do the Peter Jackson route, where you make a whole bunch of movies that are massive and gigantic and not super accessible, but very, very fan servicey, because they follow the books really pretty well. Or you take what makes those books good and tell a similar story, but like you like reform that same story into a new medium for a short-ish movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the type of thing that makes big fans of the book mad, but could make a really, really good movie still.
Yeah, this particular one, I'm struggling with thinking how it could be shortened down like that, but
you can tell a specific part of the story. You know what I mean? And obviously, I don't know all the details, because Dune is a series of books, right?
Yeah, but it's different. That's the other thing, is it doesn't really lend itself to franchising in certain parts of it, and then other parts do. And what I mean by that is, so like, just to give you an example, because of the scope of time that the author deals with in between books, there's one book so there's the first 3 that could easily be franchised. And then after that, you take a 1,500-year leap into the future, and then 3,000 years after that. And so it's weird. Like, you could almost maybe like the middle book in his original planned series was sort of like a bridge into like you could kind of do like 2 different trilogies. But even then, it's one of those things where like the series is just different in that you don't need. If you just want to read the first book, you don't need any other ones. If you just want to read 2 of them, you don't need any more. You can stop at any point in the series and be satisfied or angry, because that's when it stopped.
Well, right. So I feel like unless they're going to do that giant investment to do multiple movies kind of at once, like they did with Lord of the Rings, then I would rather them make one movie that can stand alone, and if it doesn't do well, that's it. They don't need to release anymore. And if it does do well, sure, they can build on that. But like, I'd rather them just try to make one movie. Don't try to be like, we need to make a big franchise creator. Like, we're going to set the world up with this one movie, because that is where things get really dicey really fast, because you get a ridiculous amount of exposition, and you focus so much on these other things that you can't put the same focus that you need to on characters. You know what I mean?
That is what's weird, though, is because that movie company, they bought the film and TV rights,
right,
for this, and so they're wanting to do what now all these things are doing, and do multiple platforms for.
I just feel like if you look at the great franchises in history, almost all of them started off with a standalone movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it feels like the ones where the first movie is like a setup for this big franchise, it's almost always like, oh, that was fine, I guess we'll see the next one. And then sometimes the next one doesn't even come out. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so it feels like now everybody's trying to create a giant mega franchise before they get the original seed even created.
Yeah, they need to nail down the first one.
Yeah, because even like the MCU, like I understand that they had that plan sort of in place, but Iron Man was just Iron Man. It just had a little nod in at the end to like, hey, this is kind of connected to this other one, and everybody's like, oh, that was neat. But it didn't feel like this giant setup to this new massive world.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I don't know. That's kind of what I hope. I did have one more thing I wanted to talk about, if that's okay with you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I was wondering what you thought of was like how did you find each of the characters? Because I thought the characters were actually really, really well developed. And I really liked all of them except for one, but we'll talk about that in a second, I guess.
I think we have the same one.
Yeah. Who's that one? Let's just go right into it. What did you think?
Okay, on three. 1, 2, 3.
Jared
Leto. Yeah.
Leto. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get the obsession with Jared Leto. Everybody always references some movie that he was amazing in that I have never seen and have no desire to see, and I don't even remember what it was called.
Was it the oh crap, no, I forgot what it was. The one with
is Matthew McConaughey one.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's one. There's another one that people always say he was good in, but
yeah, because he was in something before that.
That one I might actually watch at some point in the future. Dallas Buyers Club. Is that what that was?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I just never saw that. I'm not like dying to see it, but if it's ever on TBS or something, which I doubt, I'll give it a look. But but no, I don't know. There's just something about him that like he just seems out of place. Like he seemed like a teenager in a rock band, which he basically is in real life.
Oh, really? So, see, I don't know anything about him outside.
He's the lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I didn't know anything about him outside of movies, and I think the only movie I could really think of, I know he's been in other stuff I've seen, but the only one I can ever think of is The Joker. I know he was in Fight Club, but I can't even remember who he was in Fight Club.
He was like the attractive one that like Brad Pitt would always like kind of slap him on the face and be like, I forget what he called him. He had like a nickname for him.
Okay. Nah, I don't remember that.
I don't remember it too much either. I haven't seen it in forever.
Like I didn't really care for him in Suicide Squad, but that was also just a horrible movie and everything about it was
not
going to be
his fault.
Right. I like Will Smith, but that movie is still bad, right? So this was really my first foray into seeing him in something. And so it's not like he's too big of a personality to melt into a character for me because I didn't know of anything with him before. But for some reason, like he felt like he was an actor inside of this movie.
I almost think like and it's not even really his fault because I'm not saying he's like a bad actor. It's not like he did a bad job. Like he did what he was supposed to and he didn't do it poorly. Like it never took me out of it as far as his acting. It took me out of it as far as like you're just like, why this feels mismatched. Like it almost would have been okay if like they just had him being a regular business owner wearing a suit with like combed hair. Like that would have been fine.
Yeah, I would much rather him have been like what was his name in the original? Tyrell.
Oh yeah, the Tyrell Corporation.
Yeah, because it was like he was just a businessman. He was rich and had interesting tastes, and he was in this weird world, but he was just a guy. You know what I mean? And this one, it was like he could have had the same motivations of, he wanted to build a bigger army and wanted to push the human race or whatever. But they made him into like a supervillain.
Well, it was almost like I thought they were going for like a prophet type vibe. Like he's this visionary, futuristic prophet looking, like he's wearing like robes and, just how he's like decked out.
And
my problem
like this. All of the time.
And my problem is like even going for that angle is fine if you have an older, more weathered looking actor. Like I'm thinking like if what is his name? Christoph Waltz or whatever.
Yeah, well that guy is gonna make any role seem brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, well I'm just saying like if him or someone that's like older, like I'd even be fine with Jeff Bridges the dude in there.
Right.
Not really, but
I
you know what I'm saying? Just
thing
someone that looks
is
different if you're going for
it
that
didn't
look.
fit the movie. Like the character itself was even fine. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think you can have like young Lex Luthor. You can have a young old wise or a young like wise person.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But it was like he was this like almost heavily developed character that wasn't used at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I don't need him to exist in this movie. He could have been not ever shown, and that would have been fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird, and it's just a miscast. Like it's the same problem that I essentially not to this degree, but it's the same problem I had with Valerian. Like I don't even mind that Dehaan guy, Daniel Dehaan, who was like the main male lead in that.
Right. This is the movie that you walked out of, right?
Yeah, he just didn't fit the role. And I'll tell you now, if like Mr. Joker here was, on screen 90% of the time, it would have gotten kind of old. So maybe I would have done the same thing then.
Yeah.
But
I
there were
found
different
his
problems. But
sort of portrayal slightly annoying, but not that big of a deal.
Right.
And I didn't necessarily find him to be that mismatched for the character he was playing, at least. His character that he was playing just felt mismatched for this movie.
It was just kind of like,
you know what I mean?
Here's the part with Jared Leto.
Yeah. It kind of had that like feeling like, oh, this is one of his scenes now. And then the fact that his character didn't really matter.
Yeah.
Made it. I mean, obviously his character mattered in the world, but not in this story.
Yeah.
Like you never, what happened to him at the end? You don't know because it doesn't even really matter.
Right.
It was just kind of like he was there to be all nefarious and like, look, these are the bad guys, and then move on, which, everything else in the film felt so much more sort of nuanced that his character being the stereotypical like blind bad guy was kind of like, okay.
Well, yeah, mainly because they pawned off a lot of his plot and motivation onto the female robot, which was fine. Like she was the one doing most of the things on his behalf throughout the whole movie. So like you said, you didn't really even need him.
Right.
Like at
honestly,
best,
if
he could have been a person on a screen. That's
what I was going to say. If he was the Palpatine of Empire, or even you could go one step further and you could even have given him the whole killing the one that like was just born in front of him scene.
Right.
You could have given that because I do feel like that scene was actually like an important scene for her development, Love, the android. And like it kind of gave it expanded upon her motivations in a way that I felt like was good. And it kind of like let you see him and everything. But then that could have just been it. But the fact that like then he kind of did he was the one talking to Harrison Ford and sort of pseudo torturing him or whatever.
Which I liked that scene, but it didn't necessarily have to be him doing it.
Yeah, right.
It could have been a board. It could have been like
all of the problems with it being him though are the fact that he was such a larger than life character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like the fact that he was so big and like took over the scene so much that it was like you can't really be in this unless you're going to have more of an impact. Like he needed to melt into that world a little more.
Yeah, it was like what's his name from Peaky Blinders? Cillian Murphy. Cillian Murphy. There we go. I always read it. I never say it. But anyways, he, if you remember, was in Tron Legacy. He's in that movie.
What?
He's in Tron Legacy, the second Tron movie.
No, I know what you're talking about. I have no idea what he wins.
He's like the new head of like the corporation.
Oh, okay. He was the CEO at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's just like really weird because even at that time he wasn't bigger, but he was still like oh hey, that's that guy from Batman and other stuff. Yeah. And so like he was still immediately recognizable, and maybe it was like they were wanting to set him up for a third, and then they decided to abandon the third. But it was still like just a weird. That's the thing is like I feel like what you're getting at is if you're going to have an actor like that in the movie, he needs to have a bigger.
But it's not just
role.
The actor; it's the character, right? Because like I know you're saying that Cillian Murphy felt out of place in Tron, but like for me, It didn't really ring any bells. I may have had that thought like, oh, it's that guy. But that's not, you can't get away from that. But he didn't like in that boardroom thing have a long soliloquy about the meaning of life and then talk in a weird accent and rip the table in half or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. He didn't try to be this like take over the scene and be super memorable. He was serving a purpose for the story and then he was out.
But yeah, I get what you're saying though. Yeah, because I was going to say, even if he had more screen time, I still don't think I would have liked him in the movie. So
yeah, I kind of agree.
But he's fine. I'll still hold out hope for him that if we get a better director and story for a Suicide Squad 2 that can put the Joker in a more non-Macaulay Culkin coked out take, then I'm all game for that. I was fine with all the casting in that movie. I just wanted a better movie and story and everything. So, but
casting was the single thing you were okay with.
Yeah, that was literally it. Like if you would have just released the pictures and been like, "Hey, here's our cast." Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then don't make the movie, and we would have been good.
Yeah, and maybe keep the soundtrack that you actually cut and not change it at the last second, because that's one of the best soundtracks for one of the worst movies ever made, and all the music didn't show up in it. So. Rough. Except for maybe 1 or 2 songs. But anyway, we're not making this about Suicide Squad.
Everything comes back to Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I just don't want people to leave our podcast thinking that we just hate Jared Leto, because he's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a.
Yeah,
I don't have an opinion.
Still holding out for that movie that he shines in.
Yeah,
that we've seen.
So. At the end of the day, where do you rate this one compared to the original?
I'm going to be honest. I enjoyed watching it better than the original. And I think that's fair. Obviously, it would have no reason to exist without the original. So I know some people that love the old one, would say that's heresy. But it really is good enough to stand on its own after the first one's been made, if that didn't contradict itself. It does rely on the first one's existence, but it's easily dealing with its own themes, and it's solid enough by itself.
It relies on the first one in its plot. Like, its plot is derived from the first one. It doesn't make any sense without that. But in terms of the quality of the film, it absolutely stands in its own right. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
much like Empire Strikes Back is generally considered the best Star Wars film, but it definitely couldn't have existed without Star Wars.
Right. Exactly. And I totally agree with that. And that's where I stand too. I think I'm probably more on that spectrum than you, mainly because the first one didn't necessarily move me as much. Like I said, I liked all the production value and a lot of elements of the first one. And this one I felt like did a lot of those. It did them better in the sense that it's better because it's done more recently. Like I don't know that I could say that this one was better visual effects relative to its time than Blade Runner.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I don't really know. I can't make that call, but
I don't either. Everyone always refers to Blade Runner as like a watershed in visuals, but they also say that about Alien, which it's very true that all those movies did amazing things visually. So
now,
I don't know.
I do think that it's safe to say that the original Blade Runner had more of an impact on design than this one, simply because this one was derivative and I think improved on the design of the original. But while it will inform future movies a little bit, it'll ultimately that will be informed more on Blade Runner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in terms of visual effects quality and how much it pushed those, I don't really know how much the first one did in terms of that. It was really, really good, but I don't usually think of the original Blade Runner as a pioneer in visual effects. It was utilizing the visual effects available at that time extremely well.
Right.
And then the other thing I feel like that may be a notch lower in terms of relative to its time would be the music. The music in this was good, and I did really enjoy it, especially when there were actually melodies. But I think the original music, while it had a couple areas where it aged a little poorly to me, I think the original soundtrack was a little better.
even the cheesy parts of the old one, like the saxophone stuff, it still fit that tone of noir.
Honestly,
better.
you're right. It was more the scene itself. The one I'm thinking of is when he shoots the girl, and it's like, what is happening? Weird crossfades and
most
saxophone.
of the music in the old one constantly feels like he's about to start narrating over it.
Which he did in the original cut.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah, the original cut. So, like, did you happen to watch, I guess you obviously didn't, but I tweeted from our account, actually, a couple days after we released that episode. I found a video that had sort of, like, the differences in the cuts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll have to check that out. It's on the A-Town Twitter account.
Were there other cuts that emphasized more that he might be a robot?
No, it's actually the opposite. The final cut was the one that people say definitively says that he is a robot, and it's exactly the scene that we talked about with the unicorn at the end.
Oh, okay.
So
refresh me on that.
Yeah, so in the final cut, they show that like dream sequence where he sees the unicorn.
Yeah,
and then at the very end of the movie, he finds the origami unicorn from the mustache guy. I think his name's Gaff or Graff or something. And he kind of looks up and smiles. And that was sort of the guy telling him, hey, I know about this dream you're having because this was planted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's definitive, but
no, I agree. It's not definitive,
hint.
But it adds more to that. And the reason people call it definitive is because this was like one of those things that people talked about, and then he chose to add that in intentionally.
Gotcha.
Also, I think Ridley Scott has said that he thinks that he's a replicant. But then Harrison Ford says he was not a replicant.
Right. So it's sort of like the fight between who fired first.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter what the creator said because different people involved say different things. Right. But yeah, so the original cut, or the theatrical cut, I think, it didn't have that dream sequence, and it had like a scene. You know how at the very end they just walk through the door and then that's the end of the movie, so you don't necessarily know what happened. The original one had this like them in a car like driving off into the sunset or something, sort of like a little bit more like they got away, happy ending.
Gotcha.
But the big thing was that there's these narrations going on the whole movie.
Yeah, I have a DVD. Now it's not Blu-ray, but we watched the final cut because that's what was available on digital download whenever we watched it. And I have a DVD that has all three versions on it, so I might watch the other two over the next couple months.
Yeah, let me know what you think.
Yeah, because I like the idea of the narration thing. It makes it feel more like an old detective film.
Yeah, so apparently that was like one of those things that like he had toyed with, didn't really like it, but then the production studio said this is too confusing and sort of forced it. And so that's why people think it's not as good or whatever. And also supposedly Harrison Ford's voiceover is really bad.
So do people actually like the final cut the best?
Most people. Yeah. The final cut's
interesting.
Usually
because normally
considered.
People don't like touch-ups.
Yeah. But that's because in this is like one of those...
because of George Lucas, let's be honest.
Right. I mean, that is definitely what it is. Usually people don't get that upset. He just did some... I mean, I think a lot of people have done this type of stuff. Like E.T. has some decent changes in the like, later editions and stuff like that.
The best X-Men movie, Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut is actually better. I like that one.
I didn't know there was multiple cuts.
Yeah, there's one called the Rogue Cut because they originally had Anna Paquin as Rogue in the movie, and she was a part of the future plot, but they cut it just to cut 15 minutes of movie because she wasn't integral, and there was a way to do it without her.
Oh, okay.
But in the Rogue Cut, it's like it actually makes sense and it fits with the movie. You could tell oh, this is what they originally planned for her to do, and they just cut it.
Huh.
But anyways, so all that to say, sometimes cuts of movies are better. Actually, interestingly, another Ridley Scott film, Kingdom of Heaven, which is about the Crusades.
Yeah.
That was another one of his movies where most people have seen the theatrical cut. And if they have done that, they've done a huge disservice to themselves because there is the director's cut, which Ridley Scott apparently wanted them to release for the longest time, and they didn't, and he finally got them to release it. And I bought it, and it's like an hour to an hour and a half longer. It is an entirely different movie. Like, and that's one that I've seen online. Like, a lot of people will point to in discussions. They'll say like, "Oh, well, Kingdom of Heaven director's cut is like a totally different film," and it's because like apparently like the studio. He said, "I'm going to make a movie about the Crusades," and he was like, fresh off Gladiator and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, he's going to make this big historical epic that's an action film," and then he showed him this like 3.5 hour movie, and they're like, there's a lot of words in this. And so they made him cut like an hour and a half of material, and it like killed some like characterization and just like, yeah. So the Kingdom of Heaven like director's cut is like I've watched it. It really is a better movie. It includes some more like historical stuff that actually happened, and it's a good movie.
So this is going to probably ruffle some feathers, as I'm sure a lot of our opinions on the franchise will, but I like the special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, I do too. Like, there's things where I get why people cringe.
Sure.
Like the like R2D2 behind the rocks and how did he get there?
Yeah, and the Jabba the Hutt stuff was a little
changing the Cantina song. Things like that. I totally understand, but people also forget the things that do look better. Like Jabba the Hutt also used to be a fat guy walking around on set.
Well,
in the like old cut, correct?
No. So like that was a cut scene.
Oh, okay.
So the idea was that they were going to put I assume at the time, stop motion Jabba the Hutt in there, and
gotcha.
For whatever reason they just couldn't, and so that is why whenever you see all that like behind the scenes footage, you see the fat guy.
Yeah,
that was a new scene that wasn't even in the original.
Yeah, there's a lot of good scenes that were added to them, but I do understand why some of them are frustrating. So I both sympathize with the people that don't like some of the added stuff, but I also think they're exaggerating when they act like it's all of a sudden unwatchable.
Have you ever seen the despecialized editions?
No. Oh, actually, yes, because I have them on VHS.
Oh, okay, those aren't the actual theatrical releases though. They're just
mine are.
Less.
Mine are.
No, they're not because they never even released them.
Oh, okay. Because whatever mine is, they were released the year before they did the re-releases in theaters when we were little, and so they're
the one with like Yoda's face, a stormtrooper's face, and Darth Vader's face, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So and like I've seen those too.
How is that different than the theatrical cut?
Oh, dude, there's so he made a bunch of different changes between VHS versions, and I believe there was even changes before the very first VHS release. But the special edition, which is where there's lots of changes,
right?
That is obviously going to have a lot more than the ones that you have on VHS.
Yeah, and then there's even more changes that are constantly updated.
Yeah, every time they do a release, there's some new things.
Like we see old Hayden Christensen show his face up at the end of Return of the Jedi.
We need to do a prequels episode, or maybe episodes. Yes. We also need to do a despecialized edition.
We need to do a prequels episodes, and then we need to do a Hobbits episode, and then we need to do a Hobbit versus Star Wars prequels episode.
We're never going to run out of content for this. So we should probably do this because I guess we've kind of been doing this for every movie review that we've done, I think, so far. So what would you put as your sort of Rotten Tomatoes percentage score?
Okay, so on this movie, I, much to your dismay, would actually say I think Rotten Tomatoes hit the nail on the head. I would give it an 89%.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'd probably bump up just a little bit and get it into the 90s.
Yeah. And
maybe time will lower that for me.
I would give the first Blade Runner an 80%, by the way.
Okay. That's probably... I think I'd maybe put the first one in a 70 to 75%, but I can see where that'd be higher. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'd still give it the fresh. Yeah, in this one, I think I would bump up into the 90s, but probably low 90s still. I think there's definitely a possibility that time lowers that, just because so much of it was like an experience that it really was like it. I don't know. It really hit me well. I don't know if I was just primed for it or whatever. So I could see in future viewings being like, oh, this wasn't quite as good as what I remembered it being. But definitely high up there in terms of sci-fi movies for me.
Yeah, definitely.
And definitely recommend that anybody sees it. It makes me sad. This is kind of reminds me of Edge of Tomorrow or like Oblivion. Actually, it reminds me a lot of Oblivion on a visual front, but like in terms of it's like, I want more people to see this movie, and I want that type of movie to be more successful than it is.
Well, they are making a second Edge of Tomorrow.
That's true.
It's called like Live, Die, Repeat Again.
Yeah.
Or something like that. It's like the worst title in the world. But
I think Live, Die, Repeat was a bad name.
I'm always confused at what the title of that movie is, which is just they never should have done that. Like that's even if they didn't like Live, Die, Repeat, it was still less confusing than changing the title of the movie.
Well, so what happened was he wanted to call it Live, Die, Repeat, and some executive at some point thought that wasn't good, so they named it Edge of Tomorrow. And then when it did poorly in the box office, apparently that gave the director enough of like a wedge point to convince people that no, it should have been Live, Die, Repeat. That's a better name. And they kind of like agreed with him then. And then they kind of like pseudo changed it to Live, Die, Repeat. And so that was the way it was like at the store and stuff. But it's still technically Edge of Tomorrow, I think. It's very confusing.
I just remember the posters said and the trailer said Live, Die, Repeat. And so that's why everybody was like, "Oh, it's that Live, Die, Repeat movie."
No, it didn't. The like theatrical release, Live, Die, Repeat, I think may have been said in the trailer, but it wasn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That wasn't
that's
the marketing. It was Edge of Tomorrow very clearly in the original.
Yes, it was. I'm just saying like the posters and stuff said on them as like a catchphrase, Live, Die, Repeat. And because those three words showed up in big bold on the screen and with like action sequences cut between them, like I think a lot of people were confused. I think that was part of it. Like I get what you're saying.
Oh, I didn't think it was or realize it was confusing until they changed it to Live, Die, Repeat.
I thought it was Live, Die, Repeat. That's why
even
they changed
beforehand?
It. Yeah, I didn't know it was Edge of Tomorrow until someone said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was a lot of people in that camp that was like, oh, it's that Live, Die, Repeat movie. And so that's why some people were confused. And I didn't know when or how it got changed or even what it is now. I just know that I thought at one point it was called Live, Die, Repeat when it was called Edge of Tomorrow. So, I don't know. But
anyway, that movie was great, and I wish more people saw that one too. And this one, I feel like, is going to go in that same category.
I think this will appreciate over time. I didn't dig it up, but didn't the original Blade Runner, like, not quite to this degree, but didn't have something similar to this? Like, it wasn't a huge...
it was way more than this. This is only considered a flop because it had a big budget and big expectations. This one's actually, I mean, it was number one.
Yeah, and it's not it's not... It's too early to call it a flop, I think, even though some people that do this stuff for a living think it isn't. But... I mean, we've only released it domestically. It hasn't been international. There is an Asian flair to it that other like Asian box offices could love it because of that. There's lots of reasons to still bet on it, and it definitely is a disappointment. That I'm not acting like all of a sudden it's gonna.
Yeah, I think that's people are using hyperbole to describe it's a little under expectations.
Yeah.
But either way, my point being like. It's really good, and I hope a lot of people see it.
It exists, so that's kind of how I look at it. It's done and it's over with, and we have it. I don't
necessarily desperately want a sequel or anything. So
exactly. That's why I don't really care so much. I care only in a sense that I want them to feel like they accomplished something, and I want people to see it. But other than that, it doesn't matter because this isn't like a franchise that I want to.
Well, I do like. Like, even if a movie that I don't care for by a director that I really like does well, it still makes me happy because I want that guy to keep building his sort of, you can let this guy do whatever he wants cash.
That's true.
Like, I love that Christopher Nolan makes so much money with his movies because it's like, I love that this guy is sort of a auteur a little bit, but gets giant budgets. Like, that's so much fun to watch. Because there's not a lot of people like that.
Right.
And the idea of this Denis Villeneuve, however you say it.
Denis V.
The idea of him kind of growing into one of these people that, like, can do high concept movies with a large budget
Yeah.
is very, very exciting.
Yep. And he just has to make Dune. That's all I care about. He just needs to make that movie. That's it. Then he can be done. Dune can flop, but if it's good and it's made much like this, I'm happy. It's there. It exists.
All right. So you want to wrap this up?
Yeah. Okay. So if you like this movie, let us know. If you have not seen this movie, you need to go out and see it. Go support it. If you want more movies like this being made, that's the only way it'll happen.
Yep.
And so if you don't want to just be bombarded with a bunch of Transformers movies and more Pacific Rim, then go see movies like this and we'll get more of them. So
there you go.
That's my spiel. And you can obviously always find us on all our social media, Instagram, or not Instagram, but the website, Facebook, and Twitter on A-Town FM. The website is atownfm.com. We do have a Patreon. You feel free to support us if you want to. I believe at the moment we have a zillion supporters, so if you would like to become one of them.
Yeah.
And we are still selling t-shirts if you want the link to that. It's pinned at the top of our Facebook posts, and so feel free to look at that.
It's also on the website. There's a store tab.
Yeah, and we're still keeping up with our Twitter war with the what's their names?
Two Big Geeks.
Really that's right. I already forgot who they are. So them, and because they've declared war on us, and
yeah, they started this fight.
So that's about it. That's all on my end. Anything else?
No, just next week we'll be back to our sort of normal episode. Lots of follow up because it's been a while since the last time we recorded.
Right.